This episode of Songs of the Unsung is brought to you by the Edisto Blackwater Boogie. The Edisto Blackwater Boogie is a 3-day music festival that will be held October 7th through 9th this year at Gibbons Ferry State Park in Ridgeville, South Carolina, just outside of Charleston and Summerville. Proceeds from the Edisto Blackwater Boogie go towards creating an ADA accessible trail to help make the state park more accessible for those with disabilities. The Boogie is the largest gathering of local musicians in the Charleston area, with over 40 performances scheduled for the weekend. It's a family and pet-friendly event, with camping, bonfires, food trucks, artists and vendors, outdoor activities for kids and adults, and great music throughout the weekend. There's bound to be something for everyone. Visit EdistoBlackwaterBoogie.com to purchase your tickets today. Hi folks, my name is Eric Barnett, and you're listening to Songs of the Unsung, a podcast where I talk to singer-songwriters about singing and songwriting. On this week's episode, I have Jig Wiggler. Jig's a fantastic musician that plays solo and in groups such as Blue Sphere, 40 Mile Detour, and Chance and Circumstance. Enjoy my interview with Jig. Hey Jig, thanks for coming out this afternoon.
Oh man, thanks so much for having me out.
It is good having you on here. I've seen your name around Charleston a lot. I've seen you play with a whole bunch of people I know. I've seen you play in person one time. I remember I saw you and Fleming and George Fox at the Homegrown Brew House back when it was called that.
Right, Writers Round, yeah.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed your playing, and it's good to have you on here talking to you, man.
Well, thank you so much, man. Thank you, Eric.
So first off, let's talk about Jig Wiggler. Okay. Where did that come from?
Well, as you may guess, it's associated with fishing.
Yeah.
And 30 some years ago now, a good friend and I used to fish all the time, kept journals. We were serious about it.
Yeah.
Well, his daughter, who was about 3 years old at the time, I stopped by one day and said, "Hey, well, tell your daddy I was, over by checking and stuff." So he gets home and she says, "Hey, Daddy, that one guy was here." He says, "That one guy?" And she goes, "Yeah, Jig." Now, she always heard us talking about fishing and Greg and Jig.
Yeah.
My name is Greg Winkler. So that's pretty close. And then he said, "Jig." Well, Jig, honey, you know what? She said, "Yeah, Wiggler." And so it stuck. He called me up. "Hi, hey, Jig, what are you doing?" And it just stuck. And ever since 30 some years ago. So
that's a great name, and it's a great story behind the name, man. And you're lucky to have something that good happen.
I was.
That's awesome.
I get people asking me all the time though, where'd that come from, or what's a Jig Wiggler?
Yeah.
And it actually is a fishing lure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So. Like if you just Google Jig Wiggler, it's about a 50-50 split what you're going to get back, whether it's you or fishing.
Right.
Awesome. Where are you originally from?
Originally from Ohio.
Okay.
Many years back. Share time now between Charleston and Nashville. We lived in Nashville full time, quite a few years, 2005 to 2009.
Okay.
And then came back to Charleston. We were living here, went up there full time, came back, and that's the end goal is we split the month up half and half. So we try to.
Well, that's very cool.
Yeah, it works out really good. I love Nashville, fun city.
It is. Just on a personal level, where in Ohio?
Up by Toledo, Ohio. Well, actually, a little town, Ada, Ohio.
I know exactly. I'm from Ohio. I went to college in Bowling Green.
Oh, no way! All right.
My wife's from Bluffton.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
I have played all those places too. Yeah. Luke's and Bluffton. And,
Luke's and. Probably been up to Mommy at the Village Idiot.
Yeah.
Probably played a lot of places in Toledo, and Howard's and Bowling Green and all that. Yeah.
And if I say Ada, Ohio, normally people go, "What?"
I know exactly. Yeah.
Ohio Northern University.
Yeah, sure is.
So way cool.
Excellent. Saw briefly in your bio, it said at some point did you start on drums?
Yes.
Excellent. In like a school band or playing drum set? Or?
Just my older brother had drums. A little bit of back history. My mother was a music teacher and taught piano at home. So in the morning would wake up to her doing her lesson plans and hearing the piano and, but I had the opportunity at the earliest stage for her to say, "Hey, you want to do it?" And I said, "No, I want to be a drummer."
Of course, yeah.
And kicked myself several years later going, "Oh, why didn't I?" But no, drummer. And then through school started, played marching band and did, all that too finally. But that at one point I wrecked a motorcycle and in doing so broke my leg. Had to quit playing drums for a while. And my brother came up and said, "Hey, try this guitar out." And then it just kept going. But I still play drums a lot.
When you started playing drums, who are the guys you were looking up to as drummers? What sort of music were you listening to?
All rock. To be honest, probably more trio stuff. The 3-piece was always something. Johnny Winter, I was a huge Johnny Winter fan. Still am. But so some of the not so finesse players in a way, but just like that rock, heavy beat, and still, if I'm playing country drums behind somebody, there's a little bit of rock in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So has to be, but
awesome. And then when you took up guitar, kind of who were your influences there?
Well, because I was a Johnny Winter fan, and then the trio stuff, and being from up north that way, Ted Nugent, because it was really pretty, some of that for the era, heavier stuff that way.
Okay.
But and always have loved the blues, as so many people say, just influenced everything else too,
Oh, it sure did. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's a few musical genres that the United States can claim, and blues and jazz are two of those.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that one.
So you finally did come around to piano,
right?
I understand why you didn't take it up initially. Of course, if it's something your parents are saying we can do this, you're going to do the other thing. That's just how that
always
works.
Right.
Yeah. When you came up on piano, was it sort of a learning by ear thing, or did you take lessons from scratch, or how'd that work?
Well, what initially happened was I started sitting down to piano and finding hey, this sounds good. This does. And that was probably freshman or sophomore in high school. So then as I got through school and started considering college, we were visiting colleges, Bluffton College being one. And as a percussionist, you're required to be able to read, because xylophone.
Yeah.
So one of the criteria for me to get into school was, hey, can you play this sheet music? And I remember them and not being able to read music, note-wise.
Right.
I remember thinking, oh, my gosh. So I actually had to start tutoring to learn how to, because like I said, xylophone, marimba, and stuff like that, you have to be able to sight read, and that was part of the criteria to get in was to be able to sight read it, and I was lost. And and I'll be honest, it was a challenge, and probably in over my head to some extent. So it was definitely an eye-opening experience. I'm realizing, man, there's a whole thing you're missing here.
Oh yeah, I got into the School of Music at Bowling Green as a trumpet player. I auditioned on trumpet and guitar, and I played in band in high school on trumpet, so we had to read music to a certain extent and everything. But guitar, I was completely off on my own, just learning chords from friends and learning songs off the radio. And then when they sat down and put some guitar music in front of me, I thought, well, maybe I have a chance getting in this School of Music and trumpet. But yeah, it was a very similar situation. I was playing catch up the whole time, and now I wish I would have paid more attention.
Yeah, same thing. Or as I said earlier, my mother the whole time growing up, I could have very easily sat down and started learning scales and everything about it, but and I do regret it, but I do think that it definitely took me on a different path
Absolutely. Yeah.
Then, and realizing I totally was in over my head. I mean, there was some pretty rough times trying to act like I could do it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And who knows who else was faking it too.
Right.
But
true.
musicians need a whole lot of like humbling as we go.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you a quick story. A
Sure.
good friend of mine who became the drummer in our trio back in the day too, when we were all over Ohio. And we booked a 3-state area around, so West Virginia, Ohio, Michigan, and worked through a booking agent. But in high school, he was like the go-to drummer. So to kind of fake my way through that, he would play the cadences or show me, this, and I wouldn't actually be reading it. I would memorize.
You just learned it off of him.
I'll learn it off him. And, it was kind of like, I was able to, how can I say this nicely, fake my way through it.
Yeah.
And college, I couldn't do it. I realized, oh, wait a minute,
I had it was similar for me. I was very good at doing things by ear. And then there was a point in time where I realized I kind of learned theory by osmosis more than I learned it from school. Like I would just figure out like, oh, these are the chords in that key, and the minor sounds better on the 3 than the major, and you know what I mean?
Right, I do.
And I think that especially when you're young and you really want to do it, that's when you start putting these things together and then realizing, oh, this chord on the guitar is this chord on the piano, and this is what the root, this is, and my left hand can hit a root and a fifth, and for me it happened that way more organically than it does make me wish that I went back and listened to every single teacher I ever had, because I'd be farther along right now.
Yeah, sure. And when that light goes off and you put that together, that, like you said, hey, this chord fits, and that's, oh, I'm in the key of, D.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you go, oh, wow, that really wasn't hard. It just now makes sense.
Right.
But,
right.
And I do admire people, because I know, some of these guys sit down, and in Nashville, we use the number system to chart.
Yeah.
So people bring us songs, we chart it out and stuff. And whoever came up with that, I mean, honestly, really, it's amazing to me, because, those guys come in and they only want to spend an hour. They don't want to spend all day cutting a track. And it's amazing that this number system, how it works out. But when you correlate it to actual theory, you go, oh, there is kind of a connection here.
Oh, sure.
Okay, if I'm in this, the root chord's a 1, and I get it,
Well, a lot of those Nashville guys aren't classically trained,
right,
where you can sit there and notate everything, and
right.
But that's sort of their shorthand, and they're a hit factory. I mean,
yeah. Well, I'm not sure what anymore with Nashville, what's really country or what's not.
Sure,
but and for me, I'll be honest, I was very lucky there, because I had 2 good friends, and we had the idea to open a studio. Like Nashville didn't have a studio yet, right. but we and I was very fortunate. They were very talented guys, actually from up in Ohio as well, and they had been running down to Nashville a lot, and I had been recording them in my studio. Jim and Joel Brentlinger are the 2 brothers. And I used to record them in Ohio, and they said, well, man, why don't we, let's do one in Nashville, and, cool. We'll do our thing. And it was really big fun, and learned so much.
What year are we talking here?
That was in 2000. Well, I was commuting a lot back then, so probably 2003 or 4.
2003 or 4. So what was were you recording on, was it like an ADAT situation?
Oh, no, we were, at that time, Pro Tools was the thing. You about had to be using Pro Tools to just even for the people to have to take to other studios, or, for mastering and stuff. And and so, and it was my first introduction to, oh my gosh, I feel like a CAD programmer, because you would get, hey, just take that first verse and move that over here and do this. And we have so many jokes, as you've probably heard, what they have before Pro Tools, pros, they actually played it, you know, and it did kind of get that way when you're trying to, actually you get to, you're making a living, and at one point I really started losing where I felt like, man, where's the creative edge in this anymore?
Right.
You know, and met so many good people. And quite honestly, my partner Joe taught me so much about producing, and pull this in here, just a little bit of that, a little piano riff there. That's all, and just really learned so much, and songwriting, of course. From there, where there's so many people that are trying to make a living doing it, or looking for that the one, and as we were talking a little bit before we got started, I think seems like everybody was chasing it. Chasing that cut, chasing that thing. And that also at some point you kind of, back to the cliches, play from your heart, man, and it works best. So.
Well, I know I'm sure as a multi-instrumentalist, there had to be at some point the first time you got a hold of like a multi-track recorder.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, I can layer things up. It can be all me.
Oh yeah.
So I remember I had some friends that they were kind of playing guitar, and I hadn't touched a guitar yet. So I showed up and expressed some interest. So of course I became the bass player. That's sort of how that works. And
you're right.
Yeah. And I was lucky enough to be into the Beatles, and in my mind, Paul McCartney invented modern bass playing. I mean, there were other people who've done it before and better, but that whole idea of melodic bass playing is Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And then just being into the Beatles too, George Martin's production, the way they could take songs into a studio. I mean, it used to be on records, what was on a record sounded like the band, but the Beatles was really the first band that says, we don't have to do that. We can do whatever we want. And those guys had a 4-track recorder, and they didn't know how to use the thing. One of those little Tascam tape situations. And I was so into it that I just took it home for a weekend, and before I knew it, I was a piano player and a guitar player and all that stuff.
Oh, just having fun.
Yeah, man. Sure. Yeah. And as a kid, there's no better thing you can get into.
Right.
And then, I had my buddy's grandpa had a big Tascam, like an 8-track reel-to-reel, but it had the desk and everything all in one. So we played around on that. So even though I am relatively young, and when I went to college, we did learn Pro Tools. That was kind of what they taught us on. But I remember as like a 15-year-old, I was splicing tape and doing all that cool stuff. Yeah,
that is, because went in my studio in Ohio before we went there. That's what I did. Identical. It had the big TAC with the reels and the desk, and punching in and out was a chore. You got to get that right on, and now of course you just. Hey, you hit 3 when I hit the mark.
Right, yeah.
So,
I mean, I do a little production occasionally, and the way that you can just be surgical with Pro Tools, like you can go line by line and do a vocal comp that's like, oh, I liked the word and take this word, and you can do it, and it's nice. It's a tool,
right? Yeah. There's that theory though, or thought that it does take the life out of some things, it becomes too computer or too perfect. Let's quantize everything, and hey, we need auto-tune, because you're doing that. Now, I do have to say there were some things that I was very adamant against auto-tune, and I get it when probably it's used but when it's overused or and who am I to make that judgment? But I just always refused it.
It'll be interesting in 20, 30 years from now, what things that people listen to now that sound dated. Like we can listen to something from the 80s and go like that particular synth, or they're using that Simmons electronic drum set or what have you, and it'll pinpoint almost the date that came out. But then again, everything's cyclical. 30 years later, it'll be cool again. And I don't know. In one hand, nothing sounds like a record that's people in a room, a band in a room, and they do the thing, and you get all that real good bleed into the different microphones, and that's a vibe.
I think back to the Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, and they, when I say they, I mean everybody that was recording at that time frame. That's how they did it.
Yeah.
Get into the room and, get that vibe going. That was one other cool thing about, I did start seeing that vibe and energy and everything is, if you can capture that in the recording, there is something magical about it. And that's a hard thing to get a lot of times, but if you can capture that, it truly is, it just gives it a sense of realism, or it takes out that digital perfect, that everything's right on time and right on. Man, I'm gonna kind of go off the subject a minute, but one of the coolest projects that I worked on was called An Evening with George. And a guy named Jimmy Poe, he's still out there doing it, but he's played for 1964. Guy looks just like George Harrison, and really, really nice guy, phenomenal musician. And this Evening with George, he takes everything from about 1964 all the way up to the Traveling Wilburys. And what he does is comes out. Let me back up a minute. What initially started out was he was touring with a lot of these Beatle tribute bands. And when they would be off work, he'd be, oh, what do I do? Nothing to do. So he came up with this idea to market himself. So he would go out and we recorded all the tracks, which was the coolest thing ever. Yeah. I mean, when his management came in and said, hey, look, here's the book from all the studio logs from the White Album and all this, and brought these books to me. And Jimmy was just, I mean, anything about the Beatles, he knew. He kind of lived it. Sometimes I think,
sure,
I think he thinks he's George.
It was his job. Like, how cool would that be?
Exactly. And so we had to record it. He found out that to use his own tracks, I'm probably getting the legals wrong, but to use his own tracks, he didn't have to pay the same amount of royalty money as if he would take Beatle tracks and use it. There was some kind of loop in the law.
There's two different, I believe there's two different sides of copyright. There's the actual song and then the actual physical recording. So he's paying half, really.
Probably. And like I said, he was hooked up with management, and they were selling this. He'd come out in the 1964 outfit / and there'd be scene changes throughout as it progressed. And during the time, what he did was gave you a history lesson.
Oh, that's cool.
When my guitar gently weeps, I got sued for this, and I couldn't play for 3 years, and I was just woodshedding, and he'd tell you a little history, then he'd play the song.
Yeah.
And so we recorded, or I recorded with him all the backing tracks. And
now, were you playing all the instruments too?
No, he did. And we brought in people because of his connection. That's another community, these tribute bands like that. Yeah. They're like, he would be out with Beatlemania. He did Beatlemania even. And, I know this guy from that. So this guy would come in, and they just blew me away. It was so cool to see these guys sit down and play, Taxman. Yeah. And then you'd sit there talking while they're doodling. He'd play some Rush or something. And you'd go, what?
Right. Because you only think of them through that lens of the Beatles.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was just the coolest project. And it's worth Googling and checking him out.
I will.
Just because you're going to be, wow, is that George?
So when you were doing the recording and the session work, you were also doing some playing?
I was. Actually, that's where I really started hitting the keys heavy. My partner in the studio, Joe, that taught me, like I said, so much, and songwriter, and he was a keyboard guy.
Okay.
And he came in one day and said, man, because I spent most of my time on the other side of the console. And that was getting kind of, Nashville's a tough town to play in.
Sure.
I mean, I'd record kids that, blow me away, but... he came in one day and said, man, you know what? I've heard you play. And I said, yeah, I know a little bit around it. Man, take the B3 and you just wind it up, get the Leslie going, hit the high A. And he said, I get these gig calls, and why don't you take them, do some? So I started doing that and playing more keyboards and stuff, and always had the studio at my, luxury too. I would invite friends over. Another thing about Nashville too is you get and I hate to keep harping on it. Some people, sometimes it's like a bad name behind it, but if this guy's not out working, he may play for Clint Black, or he may play, you just, it's amazing, I remember once doing a Craigslist deal and buying a recording console and get over to the guy's house. And it was, this guy had played for Carlos Santana for like 3 or 4 years and was, that was amazing, because I'm like, I want to ask him a bunch of questions. I don't want to seem like that guy, so I started picking up those gigs down on Broadway and playing some keys behind it. Learned real quick that I didn't know, what I thought I knew, and but it was a lot of fun, and work in the studio and starting to, because we would usually chart for a guy, or you get songwriters that, to be honest with you, Eric, they can't play guitar. They can't, and we'd bring in the studio guys, and likewise too, those guys that if they weren't on the road or making money, $50 a track, come on in, and hey, can you get 2 or 3 for me today? Then they're you get some monster players that nice guys, a lot of them, hey, let me show you this. Hey, you can do this. And so that's where I really started branching out. And at one point, I thought, well, man, I should try to be a utility guy, play keys and guitar, and do, backing. But I ended up working more in the studio, more and more, and then that was a really good, fun time. But at the same time, too, it seems like you always want to get out and play.
Right.
Something else about that side. But
I had a notion that at one point I wanted to work in a recording studio as a living, and I did. They did let me take some courses in that in college, and I was super into that. But the thing I discovered that I was not into was listening to take after take after take of blown takes. Like, that was just something my favorite part about recording, I love getting the sound. I love moving mics around. I love coming up with little interesting ways to do tricks. I love actually doing the sort of utilitarian part of it where I'm of a mind that if you're going to put on tracks, the simpler the better, especially if you're going to layer things up so they're not all stepping on each other and everything. But I was like, I don't think I can work in a studio because I can't record music I don't like. And even if you're recording something you like, after 8 hours of it, you're gonna hate whatever song it is you've been working on.
You're so right, man. It's like I said, I felt like a CAD programmer sometimes. I was like, man, there's got to be, where's the creativity level here?
You don't want to lose the love or the mojo in just the mechanics of something.
Well, that back to all the little things you learn doing the Beatles project. We had a drummer come in. He was an on the click drummer.
Yeah,
Ringo wasn't.
Nope.
And Jimmy and I, we were sitting there one night, and we had tracked all day. And we were burnt out, and I said, "Man, that just ain't cutting it."
Right.
And Jimmy goes, "Yeah, he's not playing behind the click."
Right.
And I was like, oh yeah, he's Mr. Perfect,
Right.
and we need somebody that's dragging a little bit. And we got oh man, what was Rocky's last name? Rocky was the coolest guy. Worked for a company that made chimes for percussion, and in Nashville. Oh, I wish I could think of his last name right now, but guy came in. What are you doing? Beatles thing? Okay, gotcha. Set up, started tuned the drums. Another thing I didn't know how to tune the drums. He tuned them to a piano. Took and he said, and the thing I like to do is I'll use all sharps and flats. That way my drums stick out a little bit off, and cut through a little better. And I'm like, wow, okay.
Interesting.
When he played, had you got to start this fill left-handed. You got. I was like, what? But you back to what you said too. You learn those things. That's like the mic placement, or how did I do it? And put that in there. I remember micing up Jimmy's Vox cabinet, and boy, I'm setting all my high-end mics and doing all this, getting one in the room and everything. Same deal. We just weren't cutting it. And I just happened to be flipping through the book. There's a 57 right in front of the amp. That's it.
Yep.
And there it was. And
it's amazing, man. Because when I was in the school for recording, they would show us how to put 12 mics on a drum set, and And then you'd look at like what, what's his name that did it for Zeppelin, and he used like 3. He did that thing where he'd have like 2 overheads, and he'd have one over on the top and one way off to the side.
Right.
And then, and it's the thing that always comes back to me is it doesn't matter what you're recording into. It doesn't matter how expensive your microphones are. A player is going to sound like a player.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And, and somebody that shows up and a player knows how to tune his kit or knows how to intonate his guitar. So all those strings are going to ring out just right. And a player, you can pretty much throw anything in front of them. They're going to sound good.
Right.
You know?
You're so right, man. It is. And I really admire guys, because around town here, there's a lot of guys like that.
Yes.
And I don't get me wrong. And as you can tell, because I'm, my thing is probably more studio than, but if you see me out playing somewhere, I'm not one of those finesse guys at all. I mean, there's certain guitars I'm terrible on a Strat, because they're so fast, so clean, and so I need a Gibson where I can bang on it like an acoustic almost sometimes. Yeah. Well, out gigging, I do acoustic most of the time by myself, but when you see those guys, like you said, that just have that knack, you can hear a drummer and he sits down and you just want to snap your fingers with it. You know? And some of the way he shuffles that beat is a little different than, the guy that's almost marching banding it, and nothing against those guys, man. The technical guys are in there too, but I totally get what you mean. That's, I had a guy, and Ebo, he makes amps. Ebo builds amps I think he's out of Texas now, but he played for, Radney Foster, and he was in town one time. We were sitting there, and I'd used him in the studio before, and, got to know him a little bit. Actually, he was touring with another band friend of mine, but we were talking about studio stuff. And he said, "Man, when I go in, I like to try to get paid for doing as little as I can." And what he was saying is less is always best. As everybody, we all know as musicians, less is more. But he was like, you just add that one little thing, and don't overplay it, and same, kind of the same scenario, just like that drummer that you want to dance to, just buy drums.
Sure.
It was like, that makes total sense. You get it too busy, and you have a whole lot of busyness getting on these tracks, and it just becomes a mess of busyness.
I remember, when I was a kid, I always used to love to take my like cassette tapes or CDs, and the more liner notes, the better. Yeah. The more it listed the musicians that played on every track. And I would start seeing these musicians, and I would start seeing who produced it and who engineered it and all this stuff. And there'd be names I would see, and I would be like, it was like a weird rock record by a band called Reef. And I was like, Benmont Tench.
Oh, yeah.
That's why that sounds like that. Or I'd see another record and I go, Jim Keltner on drums. And it's those guys where, when you realize it's them, you're like, oh yeah, that's definitely them. But it's just the glue that holds it all together, man. Yeah. Like if I could play keys, like Benmont Tench, I wouldn't need to play like anyone else. Right. I don't need to be, I don't, because he's just there, man. Yeah. He's there when you need him.
Yeah. And there's, I remember in school, they were talking about in music appreciation was the class. And it was all classical because, that's what you do. And I remember the professor was saying, hey, your guys are going to be able to hear just the first 2 minutes of this and know that that's Mozart or that's this and that's that. And, I was like, I'm guessing at it because I'm, and he made the comment, and he played in a jazz band. I didn't know it at the time. And he said, I'll bet if I put on Led Zeppelin, you'll know right in a minute. If I put on Humble Pie, you're going to know, right? Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's how that correlates. It's the same kind of thing, but you have to learn what the way, Mozart liked to write. But you're right. You hear that person or that thing and you go, all right, that makes sense now,
Something that kind of gives me a little perspective too is I think about it, and it's like, Mozart was the pop music at the time.
Yeah.
It's what was popular.
That's cool. That's a cool concept.
Or we even when we talk about country music, it's not what I prefer, current country music. But if you think about what was going on in the 50s, that was pop music at the time.
Yeah.
And it's I'm always sort of a fan of there always comes a time where people see what's popular and they say, well, I'm going to do something different. And then they blaze a little bit of a trail for a minute and then it swings back in line eventually. But
right.
I think I always am a big fan of those guys that look at whatever is popular at the time and go, okay, that's fine, but this is how we're going to stand out. And that's where the Hank Williams comes in, and he was like, no, I'm going to do it this way. And then even with country music, those outlaws came in, William Whalen and the boys, and they said, we're going to do it this way.
Yeah, that's so true though, man. And I think, I don't know, and I'm by no means an authority on it, but I almost feel like corporations and money took over too.
Yes.
I remember a guy telling me something, because we put out some really good tracks, and we did some pre-production work for some people that really had it going on, and they'd say right off the bat, again, the label, we need to go in and we're going to re-record that and do this, and I'd be like, well, why are they doing that, Jim? Why they?
Yeah.
Well, they got to get paid.
Sure.
And and it was just, it's because you go back to the outlaw thing, and what a cool time that would have been to be down there and just see that, and happen. And like I said earlier, I'm a rocker. Now, the country side of it, as far as even the recording, I just got into it. I appreciate, really, I do. I pretty much appreciate anything that's done good, and it's to see some of it. And even the people out there, a guy was telling me a while back about how now they're doing drum tracks and they're using, software along with the regular drums and doing all this, creating this, and it's you once again want to kind of shake your head, but I guess it's the like you said, maybe it's the current thing. It's what's happening now, and it's just hard, and maybe I'm old. It's hard to put my head around it sometimes,
one thing. Now that recording has become so accessible to the everyman,
right?
It's sort of democratized it, where if I decided I wanted to put out an album next week and I could work on it in this room and put one out, it would not sound like it was recorded at Abbey Road or at all these big studios, but nobody's stopping me. I can get on Spotify, upload an album, be there. Now, at the time, you lose a little bit of your quality control. You lose a lot of your quality control because anybody can do it, but there's nobody telling you no anymore.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. And as anybody that's working for a living too, and back to the Spotify thing, you get million streams and a $14 check.
Sure.
I mean, that's the part that's hard to swallow sometimes, because I think that it's if that many people are liking that song and doing it, shouldn't the guy get a little bit of something? And
I was going to ask you, I couldn't find your music on Spotify or Apple Music or anything of that nature.
No. I don't know. The only one I do use is SoundCloud. And I do have stuff on SoundCloud, and that's I belong to a couple organizations, and one of them is one is Global Songwriter Connection, and those people have been great in helping me out and doing stuff through the years, and then putting me with a lot of good writers. I love to write with co-writes. I like bouncing that off each other and coming up with the ideas and. Before we started talking about, some of the guys around town that I've written with that are just, it's amazing to me. There's so many good, talented people everywhere. It's just, they don't get that break or that, over the over the top recognition. But I really don't have, I was just trying to think, and I kind of, in a way, got tainted a little bit early. I had a song cut way back in the Nashville day, which I thought, wow, this is going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible publishing deal because I didn't have a publisher, and just terrible publishing deal. Co-write, and eventually the record label folded. Typical story, you know, and of course, but it was a learning experience too. And I got really bitter about it for I'll say for a couple of years that, you know, I was still writing and playing a lot, but just, it was like, man, you know, I thought this was supposed to be, well, I called up a good friend of mine, and he's been very successful there again. I was very lucky to meet so many people, but called him up and said, man, you know, Bob, I don't want to be about the money, but whoa. It's always about the money. And he said, that's always what it's about. So you know, that there's nothing wrong with saying, and he goes, that's why you're calling.
Right.
Because it is about the money.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, you're right. You know, but I don't know. It's just one of those things. And I'm one of them guys too, that the stuff that's out there, I have a hard time going, oh, man, I should have done that, or that's not quite good enough, or, you know, and then so I get real self-conscious about it that way. And then back to surrounding myself with good people. You know, I worked with a young lady, C.K. Chance, and Cindy and I, man, we really, she really got me going to writing. I mean, really into a passion again about it. And we performed out a lot, and Cindy and I just, you know, there again, there's something about safety in numbers, maybe, or something. Because if you see me out and about playing in my solo gig, I'm your happy hour guy. You know, you want to hear something and I can pull it off, for sure. But
so I was on your SoundCloud. I listened to everything on your SoundCloud, and I did hear some stuff with her. You guys went by Chance and Circumstance.
Yes.
Yeah. That was good stuff. And I did. I noticed you play around in a lot of genres. Like there's no you're like, I'm not going to get in a box. If I want to have a country song, I'll go with a country song, or I'll go with something that sort of has an island vibe, or I'll go one that has a lot of electronic elements in it.
I did that.
Yeah. Do you have any albums? Do you have any where it's
no, I really don't. That's totally me. You mean with not really. And then a lot of that on the SoundCloud are obviously songs written, and I've I know Michaela Clark's on there. She's a Canadian artist working out in Nashville now, and young girl, and she has that sound. So when we were writing for that, I was like, well, yeah, this fits her. And you know, I used to do that. And I mean, back to that thing where chasing it, which I admit there was times at a time I was chasing, but you know, in Nashville, it's such a business where you go, who's looking for what?
Right.
Oh, this is what they're looking for. Well, you know, people aren't going to sing something that's not out of their genre, you know, or their vibe. So in a way, you're kind of going, and it's so different now because these guys hire their own writers and they're in a room doing it and putting them out there. And to be a guy that just goes down, because back in the day, we literally on Thursday mornings we'd go around and hit all the record labels and drop off CDs.
Really,
and you know, it truly was one of those situations where. One day we got a call and they turned down a song, but they called us to tell us that they turned it down, and we were ecstatic. I mean, it was
usually you hear nothing, and that means like, oh, we had a chance on that one.
Wow, they know us. They know us now. You know, no, the receptionist knows you. That's all. Because he's back again this Thursday. But it was our routine, and you can't even get in the door now, or you know, everything has to be published material, and it's even back, you know, when I would go out on the road with some of these country guys and the people would want to hand you a CD. Hey, get this to Trent. Could you do this? And you can't, you know, it's got to be published and through all the channels because those guys don't want to get sued. They're all covering themselves to make sure, you know. And it's those days are just, and I think that's what takes part of it out of it.
Yeah.
because it is the one genre that you can normally do. A lot of the rock acts, they write their own stuff.
Sure.
They don't
Yeah.
stray from that. So it's the one, and of course, I'm sure you've heard this before. So a lot of these artists, I don't think they're country. They just don't
No.
have a genre to put them in.
Right.
And
Right.
it creates that, man, by no means am I cracking on any of them, because if you're out there doing it,
Sure.
heck, who can say, more? I mean, like, there again, people around here putting out their CDs and stuff, and or working. I mean, man, some of these guys, got a good friend, and I won't drop his name, but I know you know him too. Well, I swear he's the hardest working guy in the business. He's playing everywhere. I know he sits down and writes all the time. I know he's recording, because we bounce stuff off, oh, you got to try this new, da-da-da.
Well, you're allowed to name drop on this podcast. That's fine.
It's Kevin Church.
Oh, Kevin's actually going to be my next guest on this.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I know Kevin. Kevin's a good
Kevin
cat.
is the guy.
Yeah.
The way he writes, for one, I mean, and there's several, but just his drive, and we go back a ways, but I just think that too, and he's this total guy. I mean, he works, plays. If you ask him to play, he's down at Tommy's a lot, of course, but then take him in a completely different genre, and he doesn't care. Hey, play bass, gotcha. You know?
Yeah, man.
I know he's helped us with 40 Mile Detour, know? And I got to drop Mark's name.
Yeah.
Because, he is a guy that, the one thing COVID did do for us, for me, I should say, Mark and I started writing.
Okay.
And it's funny how I met Mark, to be honest. I had written with a girl out in Nashville, a lady, and he had seen, I must have posted, or the song got posted or something. He said he had seen that I had a co-write with her. Well, he knew her from doing a songwriting thing that they do, and he's like, "Hey, you wrote this song with Bonnie." And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, where are you at?" He said, "Well, I'm just over here on the other side of Somerville." And I'm like, "Well, I'm in Charleston." And we started writing, and man, that guy's a good songwriter.
Mark's one of those guys. There are a lot of musicians in this community that, on top of being fantastic people and fantastic musicians, they are good for their community.
Yes.
And Mark is one of those guys. I know Mark gets me booked over at the Somerville Farmers Market, and he's done a lot for me, given me a lot of leads, introduced me to a lot of the right people. And I just moved to this town 5 years ago, and there are people in this town that
want to see you do.
Yes.
And I think that's, I think that's the one thing that's really appealing here, because in Nashville, a lot of times it's not that they don't want to see you do good, but they want to do good themselves.
Sure.
And it's always a little bit of,
I've always looked at it from the lens that someone else's success doesn't prohibit mine. They say a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, a win for one of us is a win for all of us.
Yeah, that's so true. And now a guy like Mark, he must have been an outlaw or a gypsy or something in a previous life. Because when you sit down and write, and one of the songs, and I think would do it today, I was like, this is too structured. I want to call Mark, and it's like, he just has a knack for, the way he can say something rather than, I went to jail,
Yeah, sure.
No, he has and I do. It's funny. I think, man, I don't know what he was in previous life. Must have been a gypsy or something, but.
Well, you want to play that song for us?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Okay, this song is Steel Wings, and actually the title, as I said before, you're always listening or pulling stuff. I was having lunch, Cindy and I, CK and I, were having lunch with Sharice Battori, who's head of Global Songwriters Connection, and she had put me with a lot of good writers, and she goes, Jig, you have those steel wings. You got the biggest heart, but I'm like, oh gosh, but Steel wings. Well, that's pretty cool, you know. Yeah, it's kind of like an angel can't take off or something, you know. And it just kind of evolved. But then I needed some help. I was like, okay, got these ideas. They sound good, well, but it could be better, you know. And call Mark.
There you go.
Help me out with this one. So,
all right, man. Let's hear it.
Sounds good. These steel wings won't let me fly, weigh me down. I can't touch the sky. Wrapped around my soul, won't let me soar. I can't feel anything anymore. These steel wings, somehow these wings will carry me away. Some way I break these chains. Somewhere, sometime, Lord, I see better days. Someday steel wings will fly. These steel wings, burnt by the sun, I can't find the truth, won't trust anyone. Ash to ash, dust to dust, shameless lies, ruin to rust. These steel wings, somehow these wings will carry me away. Some way I break these chains. Somewhere, sometime, Lord, I'll see better days. Someday steel wings will fly. These steel wings, they crush my chest, slowly drown me. I can't catch my breath, I can't feel my lungs through armored skin. Show me how to love again. These steel wings, somehow these wings will carry me away. Some way I break these chains. Somewhere, sometime, Lord, I see better days. Someday steel wings will fly. Somewhere, somehow, Lord, I see better days. Someday steel wings, someday steel wings will fly.
Nice, man. I saw a video you playing that one on YouTube.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Right. Yeah, well, that was just after we had finished it, and sat at the piano. And the other thing, you know, through COVID, where the live streaming and the video, because I was pretty new to that, but yeah, that was pretty cool.
I started doing a weekly live stream in here, and by the time I cut it off, I was getting pretty decent at it. But it was good. It was a good way to get in contact with people that you wouldn't see.
You know, actually, one of the breweries here, Ghost Monkey.
Yeah.
I play there occasionally. I love those guys. He was trying to keep it going, and you know, the thing about John, he's one of the owners, was cool about he called me up and he's like, all right, I'm going to promote this on our thing, and here's how you have to get into the site and do this and everything, so that, and he was trying to keep it alive, and man, I respected the heck out of that, because it was tough for us musicians, or anybody, everybody. I'm sorry, it's not just musicians, but you're not out there gigging, you're not getting that outlet, and it was.
I always felt a little bit guilty, because the job I worked during the day, we were actually considered, I don't know, essential or whatever you call it, because it was construction.
Oh, okay.
And so I'd never missed a paycheck from my job, other when I had COVID for a couple weeks. But so I was always really leery doing those live streams, that I didn't want to ask for money.
Yeah.
Because so I would find things like I had one buddy back home who couldn't work. So I was like, this live stream, this is for my buddy. And we would find a thing. Cool. I would try to find a thing. But yeah, I do know a lot of musicians that was their bread, man.
Well, and I by no means, I'm fortunate, a very supportive wife. But I won't say I was hurting, but it took away a lot of the drive, and it's like so when somebody said, I wore sweatpants for 2 months.
Yeah, there's a lot more impact than just the financial. Just going out and playing songs, man.
That was my side, where I was just like, oh gosh, what are you doing? And there again, though, did open the door to a lot of writing. And
absolutely.
And but there's also, it's not the same Zoom writing as it is in the room doing it. And oh man, that took a while to get used to, for sure. You know, but
when it comes to your songwriting, do you sort of have any tried and true methods? Anything that like, if I do this, a song's going to come out?
Man, I don't. I write down titles.
Uh-huh.
And if I hear something, or somebody will say a catchphrase, or a spin on it, and then if the title, and I'll go through sometimes and go, oh, these are all crap, or or the one will stick out, or I don't know. A good example. I've got a song called "Love." Okay, there's 2 titles to it, and the song title is "Ain't About That," and it was funny. A friend of mine who's a songwriter, his wife posted this on Facebook one day about, marriage is about the bad things, almost. All the troubles you go through together, all the hardships, all the, and man, the wheels were spinning. And I was like, oh, okay, wait a minute, it's, love ain't about that, it ain't about all the hugging and cuddling and all that. It's about all the hard times and these things you go through and this and that. So taking that title and writing the song, and the ironic thing about it was a publisher told me that, he said, man, it ain't about that. It's got a little negative kind of thing to it. I think it should be Love's About That. And I was like, well, yeah. So for a minute, kept it, and then I was like, wait a minute, you gotta be true to what? And so CK and I wrote that song, and I said, Cindy, I don't know. I said, I like the other title. She said, let's put it out there. We'll have people vote which one do they like.
Okay.
And hands down, it became Ain't About That.
There you go.
So it was like, so what I normally do is take a title and write and start building ideas off of it, or it does just come to me.
Do you set some time aside every day where you're like, I'm going to sit and write, or is it more of that butterfly net approach where you just got to snag one?
What I do usually is pick up the guitar, and usually it's in the morning, sometime around the, maybe afternoonish, early afternoonish, and I'll pick around and play chords, and then if something hits, and I'm like, oh, I like that progression. And I will tell you quite honestly, a lot of my songs start out with the chord progression. Yeah. Getting, and that can also take the vibe a little different,
Sure.
If you're minor, it might be sad, or it could be. It's hard, like Eric too. I'm sure you've come into this. Somebody will give you lyrics. Hey, I wrote this.
Yeah.
And could you put some music to it? And it's like, I've done it on occasion, but I thought it was a sad song.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I wanted that to rock, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh shoot. So it's all in the interpretation.
I got a buddy that will send me lyrics of his own all the time, and he's like, "Oh, this is a song I'm working on," and I'm like, "I just demo it, man. I gotta hear.
Yeah.
I can't. Maybe I don't have that poetic mind or something that I can read it and sort of.
But it can go so many different ways.
I want to know
too.
intent.
Yeah.
I know what they're gonna.
Yeah. We were lucky with that song. Ain't about that though. We played that on 102.5. Brian Cleary, man, he was very kind to us. And talk about, like you were talking earlier, sitting there in the studio and just like, oh man, I've got one chance.
Here we go.
Here we go. And it's just you can't back up there.
No.
But that was pretty cool. And then it's in the interpretation, because I got people that I love it. That's about that. Well, that sounds like that guy was a hard time. Well, no, it's about how it makes you stronger,
Yeah.
But
Now, are you primarily sitting down with a guitar, or you ever sit in front of the piano?
it's probably totally will tell you I write differently if it's at the piano than the guitar. But it just depends what I'm noodling around on, or it could be either way. So.
Do you try to demo stuff pretty quick? Get it in a phone message or something like that?
Yeah, I am terrible with remembering what I did. And so I have this little Tascam, little handheld recorder that if I know I'm going to write this idea, or sometimes I'll just jam and sing right off the cuff. And if you ever come out to one of my gigs, you'll see times where that ain't the words. If I'm terrible with lyrics and keeping them. I know guys go, "Oh man, he's got an iPad." Well, I have to. I'll admit it. My memory is not what it used to be.
I don't do it. I don't have the iPad, and I think it's misguided pride, but also I don't want to play a request I don't like. and that's my out.
Yeah, well, and that's a good way to put it too, because I'll tell you, and I mean, I know I'm going to probably catch some flack from somebody for this. If you want to hear Wagon Wheel, I will play it for you. And it's funny. I had some people ask for it one time at Daniel Island Grill, and these two little girls who I know their parents, but the little girl came up and said, "Mister, you sang that wrong," and knew the lyrics. I was like, "What's the chances of especially and it was funny, and of course made a joke out of with it, but I'll just admit it, I'm that guy. I mean,
you probably make a lot more in tips than I do.
Well, I don't know. And sometimes I think. I'll tell you how I look at it, Eric. And when I lived down on the beach, we lived on Isle of Palms, and I'd play the Banana Cabana all the time. And I loved that place. But I was playing one night, and these people came up to me and talked to me, and their story on the song was, I think it was something like Brown Eyed Girl or something. What it meant to them. That's how I proposed or whatever. I can't remember the whole thing. But I remember at the end of the night, them saying that made the night.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I guess it ain't about me.
No, it's not. It's
and
not.
I was like, well, crap, if that made their night, And and though on the other hand, now I will throw originals in.
Yeah.
And I don't usually, I'll usually mention it after the fact.
Okay.
But I figure too, if I'm going to go do what they want to hear, I'm going to do what I want to hear.
3 for them, 1 for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I go off the vibe. I always try to kind of go off the vibe of the room. And if people are kind of digging what I do to the point where I can tell, like, I think I can play a few of my own and they'll be good with it. I always tell people I give out originals like you give a dog medicine. You wrap it in something they want. so I try to get the crowd on my side and then see if we can let one out from there. When you are writing, so as a multi-instrumentalist, even if you're starting to write a song on a guitar, do you sort of hear the arrangement or hear the other instruments?
Yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. And I've actually written songs around a riff,
Mm.
playing the bass.
Mm-hmm.
I'm serious, sitting there just fooling around and going, "Oh, wow, that's a cool groove," and take it, But most definitely, yeah, I start hearing. Sometimes it's even, and I attribute that a lot to my buddy Joe, because when he was producing, I'd start hearing those little things once I picked up on it, because some of
Sure.
that stuff you don't hear
Oh yeah.
until you go back and you go, wait a minute, wow, that they like I said, they did that little piano riff right there. That's the only time they did it. But
When something happens in a song where it's like they only do a thing in the third verse, I
yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Where it's not just like a mechanical, you could just copy paste each verse
yeah.
through, or there's different instrumental flourishes.
And have you noticed the guys that are good play that?
Yeah.
They play that little odd riff that was in there, he repeated that 2 times instead of
Right.
3, and those little things,
Mhm.
and because I know I've been guilty of it when you get a request and you're like, well, okay, I know it enough to get you through it,
Right.
but if you're leaving out that one weird chord they threw in,
Right.
I love that too, man. When you hear that.
That's another, at least for me, I don't have the iPad yet because I don't want to half-ass a song. I don't want to do because I would know. I would know that I missed that the vibe of it, or I like
perfectionist.
Yeah. Well, it's not that I ever get there, but I know.
No, and there's I think there's a mindset that it's you can be your own worst enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, and critic always. I mean, quite honestly, I don't know of any of my tracks that you would hear other than the ones. Now, some of those tracks that you heard, they were sent off to somebody and they did them.
Okay.
I didn't even. The guy, I give him a chord chart, and the guy comes back.
Yeah, I could tell ones that definitely. I was like, that's not him singing.
Oh yeah. And a guy named Mason Douglas, very well respected guy out of Nashville, does those demos, and some of those were pitches that, and a lot of times I'll just send him my acoustic guitar and me singing it.
Sure.
And there's been times, I'd say once or twice, where somebody said, I like your demo better.
Hey.
And I'm like, what? But
Yeah.
there has been those times. But like I said, you'll see that, or the artist will take the song like Michaela or somebody, and then they'll do it.
Now, when you think of that arrangement in your head, and you actually go on to produce that yourself, like in your own studio, is it kind of chasing the dragon? Do you ever hit upon it, or is it?
Yeah, I think it is like chasing the dragon. I think you're right. We did one called These Days. I don't know if you listened to that. I did.
Yep.
Okay, and that was Mark and I.
You and Mark, yeah.
Yeah. And when Bobby played fiddle on that for us,
yep.
and I was hearing definitely something, but when he played it, it was like, no, that's what.
Oh yeah, sometimes that can happen too.
That's what it should be, and of course, Bobby's a master. I mean,
sure.
It's like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of like, I'm not going to try doing my own screens. I'm going to call the professional, or
sure.
or you go. There's a reason, but no, or you hear those parts, and I don't know. I think too, because there used to be that saying, hey, well, it's not country enough. I'll throw a fiddle in it. Get a mandolin in it.
Right. Okay. Pedal steel.
Yeah, pedal steel. That'll take care of everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't mean it to be that way, but when somebody adds that finesse and that to it, you go, oh wow, yeah.
When you start into writing a song, do you ever think of it in terms of a different artist? You're like, you start into a song, you go, oh, this is going to be in such and such's voice.
Right. I do, and I have, obviously, I've tried to hit to where I've went, okay, I'm going to write this for this guy.
Yeah.
And I know he's going to want to take it. And, very seldom works that way,
Sure.
of course. And then I wonder too, well, because I used to see it when we were working in Nashville. The demo singer would come in and try to sound like the guy
Oh,
you're pitching it to,
yeah.
and or I'm sure you've heard those stories where the demo singer was better than the
Yeah.
artist. He's not doing it.
You ever heard the one about Chris Christopherson landing the helicopter in Johnny Cash's yard?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
what was that? Sunday morning coming down?
Yeah,
That was the
yeah.
song he was pitching?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big, and I think that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, I've actually read that in a book too, but that's a big, but stuff like that used to happen. I
Yeah.
mean, you couldn't do that for
No.
nothing nowadays,
No.
and the outlaws today, I don't know, I don't worry.
Just think about how many songs Willie Nelson sold for $50.
Oh my gosh!
You ever read up on
yeah.
him? And he would just sell these because he was just poor as could be, but churning out songs. And you're like, yeah, I sold that for $50. I was like, you missed out on $5 million.
Or the one where I can't remember who it was. I want to say George Jones or T.G. Shepherd or somebody like that. Or I can't remember. Willie's, look, man, give me $50 for it. And the guy went, no, here's 50. You keep that song. That's a hit. And I can't remember the song either, but it's just like, I mean, and that guy, can you imagine trying to, I don't know how he can remember lyrics from all those songs that he's written.
Right.
So, I just feel amazing.
Is there a song, not of your own, but when you look at like kind of your favorite songwriters and your favorite songs, are there any songs that you consider to be like the pinnacle of songwriting where you just go like, man, in those 3 minutes, that guy did it?
Yeah. I can't give you an exact song, but I think, of course, John Prine did it.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes, it, and I was fortunate, got to see him a couple times, and man, I mean, some of them too, you're like, well, that was really corny and fun, but yet the other ones that just hit home, Rodney Crowell, of course, and I think it's cool too, and it's what I tried to do is when you said go to different genres, like I'll go all over the place. Guys like Rodney Crowell that did that, because Rodney does. I mean, and I don't know, it's a different even maybe aspect, but Delbert McClinton, I know his is, that more bluesy kind of can have a, I don't know, a little tongue in cheek behind some of them, but I really dig that guy. And when he had a thing he did with Blackberry Smoke, and they did a classic. I can't remember the song right now, but it was just like, man, that guy just nails every bit of it, delivery and But
so you mentioned a few songwriters. Do you have a favorite songwriter or somebody that you're like, that's the one, or a handful?
Yeah.
Is it just those people already mentioned, or?
Yeah, a lot of that. One of the beauties of Sirius Radio is that it has turned me on to so many different. There's a guy out there right now, Charlie Crockett. Have you heard any of his stuff?
Yes.
And man, he's got it. The guy's voice is not Frank Sinatra, or who, it's one of these powerhouse country guys, but his band is tight. They kind of feel like every cover to me, everything from that Detroit sound to hardcore country to the two-step, and yet band his lyrics. I think Jim Lauderdale, some and that some of that stuff's obscure. Buddy Miller, I'll be honest. Mark probably turned me on to, but we were playing a song called "Blame It on the Wind." I think it's the title, and I was like, man, that's really cool. That's got and I've heard his name, but I never really researched or went back in and put the playlist. But the beauty of the satellite radio, So.
Now, is that the way you're usually listening to music, satellite radio?
I have my list that I like on my phone. So so on all these road trips, I either have mine blasting or I go in satellite radio, and then it depends on again the genre or what I'm feeling like, or or
Are
not.
you more of are you a albums guy or a singles guy?
Singles.
Singles guy?
Yeah, I like to mix it up.
I gotcha.
And there are some of those albums that you got to play in order because
Give me some examples.
Well,
What are if you give me a couple albums that you'll put it on and that's going to be it for 40 minutes.
Okay. Now I'm again dating myself, I'm sure, but this just came up, and this band, and because I like the up-tempo rocking, Captain Beyond, a band called Barefoot Servants.
Okay.
And they were a bunch of studio guys, I think out of Texas, that got together, and it's more rocking, probably classic rock, obviously, because
Sure.
I'm old. I mean, I don't listen to a lot of the new. I'm trying to think. It and like you said earlier too, though, you get some Beatles stuff on. Sometimes you gotta let that roll.
There's some songs that, like, if I hear Heartbreaker and I don't hear Live and Love and Made right after it,
yeah,
it's like you have to. It's like when you can't sneeze and you have to sneeze. You just
Right.
feel weird.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do. I
Yeah.
do. I get what you're saying there.
Like when Boston's Foreplay plays and you don't hear another, after it. That's weird.
Well, and you mentioned Boston, man. That's one to me that Tom Schultz, man, that guy just. Shredder being said, but also melodic, it's like, so you get that stuff, and that really is, I don't know, hits a nerve, it does. But
Excellent. What are you currently working on?
a studio.
Yeah.
It's been a long process, and it was down for longer than I thought I would be down with the construction and everything. And so I'm at the state where I can see daylight, and start. My goal is to start moving gear in
Nice.
probably a month. So
Nice.
So I'm just trying to get through that because I feel like I was telling my wife the other day. I said, it's just overwhelming. I feel like I have all this long list, and I'm not. I'm not sitting there playing and doing what I like to do. And the goal with this whole thing is to do like we were talking earlier about being able to sit in there with a group of guys, play, do it as you're writing it. What I mean? Be able to just, whether it's a raw live track or whatever, just be able to have that vibe and that comfort and just be plug and play, because I think that's the other hard part about working in a studio and stuff too. You are always concerned with if you have something set up and it's plug and play, but if you don't, you're always trying to get the sound.
Yep.
This guy's too loud. I'll put him in an ISO booth. If you're in an ISO booth, well, I don't feel the vibe from this guy here and this,
So are you going to kind of have the standard control room, live room, ISO booth setup, or are you?
I'm in a live room situation, and what I'm trying to kind of model after Government Mule, another one of the bands I really dig, by the way. But they just did a blues album. It's probably a year ago. They did it raw,
Nice.
and I want to be able to capture that way. Granted, if you're trying to make something that you want for real airplay, you probably have to go in track and isolate and stuff like that. But I just want to be able to call the guys up and say, let's jam.
Nice.
And I think that's the other part about studio, that you get all that pressure.
Yeah.
Of, I mean, I've seen both sides. I've had it where a guitar player, really good, well-known guitar player, we were working together, and he had a rough night the night before. I mean, I knew he was hurting. And we were tracking a song for a guy named Lewis Copeland. And Lewis and I wrote a couple together, but Lewis was doing really well for a while. But I noticed the guitar was out of tune. And I'm like, hey, man, you need to tune up. And he hit me back, hey, dude, you push the buttons. I'll play the guitar. And, you can't walk out.
Right.
You can't. And those kind of situations, just no room for that.
Right.
And bad day or not being said, you want that vibe where you can go in, and when you're trying to get it all perfect, sometimes it's impossible sometimes, but
That's excellent, man. Well, I'm excited to see the progress on the studio. I hope you get post about it and all that
there
stuff.
will be. I'm putting pictures out and just I was thinking the other day I should make a documentary.
Yeah,
because we have it from I got in a situation where the city wouldn't let me do, and this is not commercial. I'm not doing this to make a ton of money or anything, but I had a perfect plan. Well, the city didn't like the plan, so we had to convert a room, do all this overpriced construction, and so to see it this far finally is
sure.
It's just that feeling and of satisfaction. And man, I mean it sincerely. So many people around here, Kevin being one, and Jamie, of course. She's so talented. Have people come, stay, visit, hang out, play. Just it seems like a good way to, as someone would say, sitting in the rocking chair on the front porch, retiring.
Yeah,
that'd be my way to do it. Man.
And you also get to be the person that you wish was around for you.
Yeah.
When you were in your heyday of just playing and wanting to pump out tunes and what have you, imagine having that person there.
Man, I always, and this was all a goal for a while, but was that when musicians play if you're playing 3 nights a week or Friday and Saturday, and you're out there with the band, man, on Sundays you're always like, oh man, what to do. And now there is a thing about rest, I get it, but I always was like, man, need a place where you can crank it up on Sunday and have, just
where you can play for the love and not for the money. And just do whatever you feel.
And not lugging all the gear.
Right.
That's when you do know you're getting old. It's like, oh, I got to move all this stuff,
I'll be excited to see the progress on that. And then in October, we've got the Blackwater Boogie coming up.
I'm so excited about that.
And I think you're over there on the songwriter stage?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm excited for that.
And what a cool event. I was fortunate enough, Dan had CK and I out a couple years ago, and it was it's just so cool. And that is the neat thing, because they are receptive to your original stuff. That's what they want. And
that's what it's for.
That's what it's for. And I'm just so excited about it, and fortunate. I'm going to play with Blue Sphere too at that one.
Nice. Yeah. Dan talked to me about. He said, "Hey, we've always had 2 stages." He said, "Would you be interested in running like a songwriter stage?" I said, "Yeah." And I would love to have something where it's expected that if you're going to play your own song, tell people about it. I've always been a fan of, remember VH1 Storytellers? I was a big, like when that came out, nothing makes me happier than hearing why a song came about or a funny story about it. So I'm excited to hear all your songs and hear you talk about it, and really appreciate you coming by. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. You got one more song you can leave us with?
Yeah, I think so.
What do you got?
We'll do Ain't About That.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
That's a good title.
Thank you.
Let's hear it.
Thank you so much,
man.
Eric. And I appreciate you doing this too, because it is really cool to hear the backstories. I'm with you there. I love going, oh, wow, that's why that came up like that or that. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it ain't about hugging, loving, cuddling and kissing, breakfast in bed, keeping score, keeping track, all those Bitterwood said. Who's doing more, who's doing less, who's bringing home the bread? No, it ain't about that. No, it ain't about that. I said love, it's about so many things. Staying up all night with the little one when you need to get some sleep. I said love, it's that person next to you. Your rock, your world, your everything, and all that you've been through. Yeah, that's love. Yeah, love. Love's about that.
Well, now late night sitting alone and wishing you could take it back. Cruel words in the heat of the moment, yeah, you didn't mean that. Those lies and suspicions, accusations, rash decisions, no, it ain't about that. No, it ain't about that. I say love, it ain't easy. No, love, it ain't hard. It ain't about money, diamond rings on fancy cars. I say love, yeah, it's that person next to you. Your rock, your world, your everything, and all that you've been through. Yeah, that's love. Yeah, love. Love's about that. It ain't about bank accounts and checking phones, wondering if they're alone. Who's doing right, who's doing wrong, 'cause they didn't come home. Who's thinking about leaving when they're really already gone. No, it ain't about that. No, it ain't about that. Well, now love, it's about so many things. Shutting up all night on a Netflix binge when you need to get some sleep. I say love, yeah, it's that person next to you. Your rock, your world, your everything, and all that you've been through. Well, now love, it ain't easy. Yeah, love, it ain't hard. It ain't about money, diamond rings on fancy cars. I say love, yeah, it's that person lying next to you. Your rock, your world, your everything, and all that you've been through. Well, I love, yeah, that's love. Love's about that. I said love, yeah, love. Love's about that. Love's about that.
What a great song, and what a great fellow that Jig Wiggler is. I want to thank him for stopping by, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I'm excited to have Jig, as well as many other local musicians who have been on this podcast, on the Songs of the Unsung stage this year at the Edisto Blackwater Boogie. Gearing up for that right now. Make sure you go through and check out all the songwriters who are going to be on that bill. I've recorded many episodes with them talking about their songs and their influences, so you can kind of get to know them before you go. Sorry it's taken so long to put out episodes. I'm actually on vacation right now in Cocoa Beach, Florida, recording this on a little laptop mic, so if it sounds weird, I apologize. Bear with me on this. I'm still figuring out this podcasting thing. Up next on the podcast, I'm talking to Kevin Church. Really wonderful guy, one of the first musicians I met when I moved to Charleston, so look forward to that. Until then, thanks again for listening to Songs of the Unsung. My name is Eric Barnett. Be sure you check out Songs of the Unsung on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. All the likes, shares, subscribes you're doing really helps out. Helps get the word out for local singer-songwriters. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.